The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics. And for the past 6 years, I've been working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. How we doing?
Doing great, Tan. Football is so close. Oh, I'm so excited for it. Football season needs to be here, but we're going to get that little taste of college football this weekend. And then NFL is going to be here before we know it.
Yeah, and Bob's got the free analysis for those, 6 or 7 games we've got on Saturday up on the website. So go check those out. He's got a lean up for free. And then, he's already started releasing week 1 plays to clients as well.
All right, so the first award we are going to talk about is the NFL MVP. So we see that 12 of the last 17 MVPs have come from the team with the best record in the NFL, which is why people also call it the most valuable player on the best team. 20 out of the last 23 MVPs have been QBs. Every MVP winner has led the league in EPA per passing down since 2016. And the voters just love to look at TDs, interceptions, and completion percentage, but this doesn't always equate to who the best QB is. It just kind of just shows who the most productive QB is. But
Right.
I think the voters also get tired of voting for the same guy. And when there's 2 players that are close, they're going to pick the guy who probably didn't win last year. And we look at last year, we see Mahomes won. And the top odds for this year are Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Hurts, Lamar, Trevor. Who stands out to you as the most likely to win?
Well, like you were saying, it's not necessarily who the most valuable player is. It's really just who has the best production on.
Yeah.
It has to be one of the top teams. So let's look at the top teams. Like you were saying, and let's look at who we can expect reasonably has a good chance to lead the NFL in EPA per play. And everyone, immediately goes to guys like Mahomes, Burrow, and Josh Allen. And I think Josh Allen has the best chance to do it among those guys. I mean, people have forgot that Josh Allen did lead the NFL in EPA per play during the first half of last season before his elbow injury. And the Bills do have the 5th highest win total in the NFL, despite the tough schedule. So if they get out of there, going 12-5, maybe even 13 wins, a lot of credit is going to go to Josh Allen. The weapons for the Bills are basically exactly the same as last season. The offensive line improved slightly, losing Roger Saffold, replacing him with Connor McGovern. And theoretically, if rookie Osiris Torrance wins that starting job, then he will be an improvement over what they got from Ryan Bates last year. And now this offense is a little bit more versatile, which could open up the deep passing game from heavier personnel sets after signing Damian Harris at running back and drafting Dalton Kincaid in the first round. And speaking of Kincaid, usually we don't see rookie tight ends produce right away, but Kincaid is going to be 24 years old this season. So he'll be one of the older rookies in the NFL, and he has a better shot than I would say most rookie tight ends to produce right away. So Allen has never won this award, despite being one of the best players in the NFL the last few years. He's well liked by the media. And I think, if he's in the mix, if he's, Bills have a great record and then he's leading the league in EPA per play, then he would be my favorite among those top favorites.
Yeah, it feels like Josh is just due because he's been talked about as the elite quarterback. His name is put in with every top conversation, but he hasn't won an MVP yet. So I think that's a really good one this year. But if you're going to look for a long shot guy, who would you be shooting at?
Well, I'm going to say Dak Prescott here, who quietly is ranked 3rd in success rate during the last 4 seasons. And we could see Mike McCarthy go the other direction to justify his moving on from Kellen Moore this offseason. Now, it made major headlines early in the offseason that McCarthy moved on from Moore for his, quote, desire to light up the scoreboard. And everyone assumed, oh, no, McCarthy's going to go into boomer ball and that would take away from Dak's case. But I think, if McCarthy moves on from Kellen Moore, who's called the plays for successful offenses in back-to-back years, he's going to want to make sure that offense doesn't drop off. And the offseason moves for the Cowboys certainly suggest that they intend on passing the ball quite a bit. They didn't bring back Ezekiel Elliott. They basically have no depth at running back behind Tony Pollard. The offense lost Dalton Schultz, and Noah Brown. But both of those guys were among the 13 qualifying receivers last season to have a negative EPA per target, and they brought in Brandon Cooks, who has a career 1.81 yards per route run and is a top 50 wide receiver in my mind to play alongside CeeDee Lamb and a finally healthy Michael Gallup. And I think people forget that Michael Gallup himself has top 20 wide receiver upside. We saw that in the 2019 season when he averaged 9.8 yards per target and had 50 first downs receiving. And we know that CeeDee Lamb is one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. So I like the receiving group for Dak Prescott. Tony Pollard himself can get involved in the receiving game. And I just don't see this team running for, more than 25 carries per game, just based off of the depth they have in that backfield. And then we look at the offensive line that will be pass protecting for Dak Prescott. Left tackle Tyron Smith has made the Pro Bowl in every season he's started at least 10 games since 2013. Tyler Smith, who's going to play left guard this year, was passable playing at left tackle last season when he filled in for Tyron Smith, and he certainly will benefit from moving into the easier position at guard. Center Tyler Biadasz is one of 6 qualifying centers last year to not allow a sack. Right guard Zach Martin has been All-Pro in 4 of the last 5 seasons, and right tackle Terrence Steele is above average also, ranking 15th in pass blocking efficiency. And I think you can easily make the case that these pass blockers in front of Dak Prescott are the best in the NFL. And the Cowboys have the 6th highest win total with an average strength of schedule because they benefit from playing, a relatively easy NFC despite them being in the toughest division in that conference. So it all kind of nets out as an average schedule. And Dak is listed at 22-1 at Chris to win the MVP, which is the same odds as Justin Fields. And I would say that Dak, in my mind, has a much, much better chance of winning the MVP than Fields does.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, everything that I kind of said that happens when they're looking at MVP voting, Dak starts checking off a lot of those boxes. And I think it's interesting that he has the same odds as Justin Fields, because I saw that Justin Fields has the most bets or the most money down to win MVP, which I don't know. People can chase that, but let's move on.
The Bears aren't going to win enough games,
No.
For Fields to win the MVP, the Bears would have to win 12 games. That's just not going to happen, even if Fields is great. So you have to look at teams that can win games.
100%. But let's move over to the Offensive Player of the Year. And all these other awards require just 3 votes, but the MVP is the only one that takes 5 votes. And when we look at the Offensive Player of the Year, running backs have won this award more times than any other position. 3 of the last 4 winners have been receivers. 28 out of 49 Offensive Player of the Years have also won the MVP. But voters have kind of tried to start giving this award to other positions than QB, since the MVP basically every year is just whoever the best QB is. But if we're looking at last year, we see that Justin Jefferson won. And if you're looking at the top odds, you see Jamar, JJ, CMC, and Chubb as the favorites. Who sticks out on this list?
Yeah, based on your analysis of how this award goes historically, to me, it feels like it's going to be a receiver to win the award because, like you said, they haven't been giving it to quarterbacks too much recently because that's going to the MVP, and everyone has been talking about how running back value has been diminished, and that's becoming a more and more popular opinion in the media as well. So I'm kind of focused in on wide receivers when I look at Offensive Player of the Year, with the acknowledgement that it could just be the same person that wins MVP, because we've seen that about half the times too, which makes this award such a confusing award. But from a value standpoint, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown at 25-1. I mean, the market implication based off the point spreads and totals we've seen listed on all the games this season have Detroit's offense projected to finish top 5 in scoring. And then you just look at this depth chart. His only target competition is Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, and maybe eventually Jameson Williams, who's had one of the worst starts to an NFL career I could think of. And then there's also second round rookie tight end Sam Laporta. I mean, if this team is going to be top 5 in scoring, it's all going to come from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And he was already targeted on nearly a third of his routes in 2022. And I just don't see how that doesn't happen again. That touchdowns haven't been there for him thus far in his career, but he's going to get double digits in one of these seasons. And I think this might be the season. We talked about in that fantasy podcast that Amon-Ra was tackled inside the 5-yard line 7 times last season. That's not going to happen again. I mean, he's going to find the end zone. So if he's getting all these targets and he's finally finding the end zone, and the Lions just finished at their market expectation as a top 5 offense, I certainly think that 25-1 is a good value. Not to mention the Lions are a well-liked team by the media. And they're not, and the media is not going to give Goff the credit. I mean, the media has seen Goff play poorly in his career. So it's all the credit is going to go to Ben Johnson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think that 25-1 is a pretty good price.
All right, let's look at Defensive Player of the Year. So when we look at some of these trends, we see that 8 of the last 11 winners have played on the defensive line. Only 2 Defensive Player of the Years have ever won MVP. I mean, since passing has become more popular in the NFL, pass rushers have also become more valuable. And the Defensive Player of the Year oftentimes leads the league in different pass rusher stats. So
right.
The typical criteria comes from the form of sacks, tackles, interceptions, pressure rates, and forced turnovers. And when we look at the guy who won last year, it was Mr. Nick Bosa. And at the top of the odds this year, you got Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, and Nick Bosa.
Well, I think the point that you were making there is kind of the way I want to go with this, which is just to avoid cornerbacks when picking this. Now, sometimes cornerbacks do win this award, but it really just comes down to interceptions, which are so much harder to predict than even sacks are. And so I think that it's safer, especially if you're going to go with someone with these shorter odds, like you talked about that group of 4, to go with a defensive lineman. And I think that that's why those 4 are at the top of the market here. And I'm going to say that among Parsons, Garrett, Watt, and Nick Bosa, I would say that Garrett is the best guy to go with there after the Browns brought in defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz this offseason. He'll bring that 4-3 defense that focuses on an aggressive 4-man front with the wide 9 technique that benefits edge rushers so much. It's gotten to the point these past few seasons where Garrett has commanded double teams or even triple teams from opposing offensive lines. And I just don't think that we're going to see that again this year based off of the Browns' moves in the off seasons. They brought in Okoronkwo, who had more pressures than Jadeveon Clowney did on fewer pass rushing snaps last year. And they also brought in Zadarius Smith at edge rusher, who ranked 6th in the NFL in pass rushing efficiency. So now there's finally some guys on the opposite edge to command some attention away from Garrett and up the interior. We know that Jim Schwartz helps develop those guys. We've seen Schwartz do wonders with Albert Haynesworth in Tennessee, Ndamukong Suh in Detroit, and Fletcher Cox when he was in Philadelphia. And the Browns signed Dalvin Tomlinson, who ranked 8th in PFF pass rushing grade last season. Now, Garrett, despite not having anyone next to him his whole career, has averaged 0.9 sacks per game. So it's not crazy to me to think that he can eclipse over a sack per game this season, not seeing as many double and triple teams. And if he stays healthy, that would mean 20 plus sacks for Myles Garrett, who's currently listed at 7-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year.
I love that pick. But who would you take a long shot on? I know this one is a little tough on defense, but is there anyone that comes to mind?
Well, for longer shot, I'm okay with going away from defensive linemen because we can lean into that turnover variance. So I'm going to take a massive long shot here and say Derwin James at 100-1. And that would be under the assumption that Derwin and his ball skills gets something along the lines of 5 interceptions and 4 to 5 forced fumbles. And we know this Chargers defense has a chance to be elite. I have them rated top 5 in the NFL in talent, and Staley is also one of the best defensive play callers in the NFL. And we've just seen them not perform up to these standards these past few years because of the injuries. So they might be hiding in plain sight this year. I mean, if you look at it, there's 3 other former All-Pros on this defense, along with Derwin James in Khalil Mack, J.C. Jackson, and Eric Kendrick. And that doesn't include Joey Bosa and Asante Samuel. I mean, the talent is absurd. And I feel like the pass rushing productivity here might be split between Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. So I don't want to take either of those guys. It's kind of widely recognized that Derwin James is the leader of this defense, and he has some of the best football instincts in the NFL. And we could see a season from him similar to what we got from Troy Polamalu in 2010 when he won Defensive Player of the Year with 8 takeaways and 6 tackles for loss. That doesn't seem out of the question for me for Derwin James this year. And certainly at 100-1, I don't mind taking that long shot.
Yeah, I think just another underlying thing here is that we're pretty much expecting the Chargers offense to be a little bit better with Kellen Moore. And if this offense is better, this defense is going to be able to be way more aggressive. And the more aggression is going to open up the opportunity for Derwin James to get more interceptions and all of that. So I love that pick. 100-1.
100-1.
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy play. It's an easy play. But let's shift over to the offensive rookie of the year. So we see that Herbert, Kyler, and Dak are the only QBs to win it within the last 10 years. Running backs have won 4 out of the last 10 awards. There's been 5 wide receivers that have won in the last 20 years, but wide receivers have won in back-to-back years now. So looking at this year's market, you've got Bijan, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud as the favorites. Who sticks out to you here?
Well, this award kind of feels like to me just the rookie that has the best fantasy football season. And with that said, I think Bijan is rightfully the clear favorite as he's 8th in ADP for fantasy drafts right now. And the next rookie isn't drafted until 37th, Jahmyr Gibbs. So Bijan is listed at plus 250, which I'm a little bit surprised by based off of his market expectations for this year. I would have thought those odds would be a little bit lower, but we talked about in the fantasy podcast that we're not as high on Bijan as the market expectations are. We're personally lower on him due to the workload that I think the Falcons are going to give Tyler Algier and Cordell Patterson. So I understand why Bijan is at the top there, but I don't know that I would go with him.
Yeah, this made me kind of start to wonder about Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit because he's not even in the top 4 here, and he's a superstar running back that they are super excited about, and this team is going to be a high-powered offense, so I feel like he might not be a bad pick.
Yeah, in the mix there. I mean, we talked about someone's got to score and someone's got to get yardage outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, Amon-Ra is not going to finish the year with 4,000 yards. And we talked about, it's pretty much dust at every other skill position for the Lions. So if they really focus on Jahmyr Gibbs, go full Christian McCaffrey with him, they used a lot of draft capital and Ben Johnson's one of the most creative offensive minds in the NFL. That could be a good potential spot.
All right, well, let's look at who you got for the long shot here.
Yeah, so for the long shot, I'm going to go ahead and say Rashee Rice, 50-1 for the Chiefs. And we talked about this in the Fantasy Football Podcast as well, that someone needs to soak up the 100 targets and nearly 1,000 yards that Juju Smith-Schuster produced last season. And there may be even more work available with Travis Kelce potentially taking a step back in his age 34 season. And we talked about how we assume that guy is going to be Richie James, but it's not a guarantee to be Richie James because Rice has gotten basically the same amount of snaps as Richie James is in the preseason. And I don't think it's going to be any of the other guys listed on the Chiefs wide receiver depth chart. I just don't think Sky Moore is a very good player. MVS is just going to play his normal role, stretching the field, getting 4 to 5 targets per game. And Kadarius Toney is already nursing a knee injury and has been extremely volatile throughout his career. So if it's not Richie James, it feels like it is going to be Rashee Rice to me, who we saw Mahomes openly lobby for the Chiefs to draft this offseason.
Yeah, I think Mahomes maybe isn't the best drafter, he made us take Clyde, but maybe he's better with receivers than running backs.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just like I'm just seeing a huge gap in production for the Chiefs, and I don't necessarily think that a second round rookie is just going to step in and fill it, but it's certainly possible. And maybe the second most likely player to fill that production is Rice.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great pick. But let's move over to defensive rookie of the year. And some of the trends we're going to see here is the past two winners have had some of the best seasons in the entire league, with Parsons in 2021 and Sauce Gardner in 2022. The last 10 years, there's been three cornerbacks, five defensive linemen, and two linebackers to win. The defensive rookie of the year was won by linebackers 26 out of 47 years until 2012. Um, s- Six of the last eight winners have put up at least 7 sacks. There's only been three corners to win since 1999, so I think that's a tough one for them. And
Yep.
typically, we see a winner come from a team that was very poor statistically, and then they make the improvements the next year with a new player. I mean, obviously, you look at a team that was bad and they spend high draft capital on a top defensive player, their defense is going to turn it around. So, who sticks out for you here?
Well, that last thing that you mentioned, that kind of screams Texans to me, who have a top 10 defense in their range of outcomes. With D'Amico coming over, he's one of the best play callers in the NFL to me, and they spent a ton of money on free agents on that side of the ball, adding Jimmy Ward, Shaq Griffin, Sheldon Rankins, Corey Littleton, Darius Phillips, and of course our guy Denzel Perriman. And they spent massive draft capital on Will Anderson, but he already has the lowest odds in this market at plus 285.
Yeah, I don't think that's touchable. I mean, it's not a terrible price, but I wouldn't be going with that one. So if you're gonna take a shot at another guy, a longer shot, who would it be?
Well, another longer shot. I'm going with another Kansas City Chief here and say that Felix and Aduke Uzama at 38-1 is my long shot. And obviously, we're watching the Chris Jones contract situation closely. He just recently threatened to sit out until week 8. And if he does hold out and the Chiefs defense still generates a decent pass rush, the credit might go to newcomer Felix at Aduke Uzama, who I'm now going to refer to as FAU, because I don't want to keep saying that name. So the credit might go to him. And if he does not hold out, then we know that Jones will command double teams on the inside, leaving George Karlaftis and FAU 1v1s against tackles. And we remember that Jones had 77 pressures last season, which led all interior defenders, and opposing offense coordinators are going to do basically anything they can do to scheme him out of the game. Now, Frank Clark was not able to take advantage of that last year, and he really wasn't his entire Chiefs tenure, but there's a chance that FAU will. And I think that the Chiefs are going to be pretty strong on the back end, which will help the pass rush get extra time to get to the quarterback. So the Chiefs were basically playing with two rookie cornerbacks on the field for almost all of last season. And Chiefs first round rookie Trent McDuffie was carted off the field with a left hamstring injury 32 snaps into his career, and he did not return until week 9. And the difference between Kansas City's secondary with McDuffie compared to Joshua Williams was pretty drastic. So Williams was targeted about the same as McDuffie. Williams saw 43 targets into his coverage and McDuffie 45 targets, but Williams surrendered 434 yards to McDuffie's 242 yards allowed. In weeks 2 through 8, with Williams and Rashad Fenton starting at cornerback alongside another rookie, Jalen Watson, Kansas City's defense was surrendering a 49% dropback success rate, which ranked 25th in the NFL. But then the Chiefs' pass defense conceded only 42% dropback success rate after week 9 when McDuffie came back, which ranked 4th. And McDuffie was playing alongside Watson there. So we can see how much of a difference McDuffie made, and he's healthy again. And now him and Watson will be making that year 1 to year 2 leap that we talked about in those previews. This Chiefs secondary all of a sudden seems pretty dangerous. And then we also have to factor in that Steve Spagnuolo loves to play press coverage. In fact, he played press coverage 44% of wide routes, ranking second highest in the NFL. And we know that press coverage gives the pass rush more time to develop as well. And so all of that said, I think that this Chiefs secondary will be improved, which will give the pass rush more time to get to the quarterback. The Chiefs just spent their highest pick in this year's draft on a pass rusher. And so I think that if FAU can get 10 plus sacks on a Chiefs defense that has the chance to be the best in the Mahomes era, 38-1, not a bad price.
So, looking at the comeback player of the year, we see that this award has typically gone to QBs. 11 out of the last 15 winners were QBs. And if a player is coming back from a severe injury and they were able to do decently well, they're almost a lock. But when there's years with players who are not returning from severe injuries, a player who bounces back from a bad statistical year can steal this award. So, since 1998, there have been 15 winners coming back from injury. There's been 5 bounce back players, such as Tannehill in 2019. There's been 3 medical conditions that have came back. And this is a guy like Eric Berry. But then there's also 2 players that have returned to the league. And this is a guy like Mike Vick. So does anyone stick out to you as the clear favorite or who you would want to pick if you're betting on comeback?
Well, like you said, it seems like after you lay out all those numbers, it's always going to be the guy coming back from severe injury as long as, he plays. And what could be a more severe injury than what Damar Hamlin suffered last year? So we see him at the top of the market listed at minus 400. It's a little bit weird to see a 4th string safety listed with such great odds to win comeback player of the year, especially if he's only going to get 50 to 100 snaps, assuming the guys in front of him stay relatively healthy. But I don't know. It just might be hard for the voters to not give him the award so long as he's on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair thing to say. I mean, if Damar plays at all after this recovery, how do you not give it to the guy? But if we're taking Damar out of the equation, is there someone that you'd like to take a longer shot on?
Well, just looking at the board, I see Calvin Ridley up there at 25-1, and he has a shot to lead the NFL in receiving yards. So he didn't play last year. You talked about how we've seen that award go to 2 players who just were out of the league. We saw Mike Vick win the award after he was doing so after the dogfighting incident. So it's possible that voters reward Calvin Ridley coming off the gambling incident, but it also maybe voters don't want to reward that kind of behavior. So I don't know. It doesn't feel likely to me, but 25-1 may be worth a small wager.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a battle between taking Ridley for this or maybe offensive player of the year where you can get him at 60-1. This one might be, I don't know. I just feel like it might be locked up with Damar.
Yeah. But Ridley is competing against so many more guys in that offensive player of the year award than he is in comeback player of the year. And we've seen voters give it to someone in Ridley's situation who had been suspended previously. So it's possible, but I don't know. I feel like Damar is the clear favorite and probably going to get the award.
All right, so let's move over to Coach of the Year. So this award has oftentimes gone to the team with the best record. But if a coach can change a team to make them win 5 to 7 more games than they did the year before, they're going to have a pretty good shot of winning this. First-year head coaches have also been a favorite as they're usually taking over a bad situation and then they're able to turn it around, which kind of entails that 5 to 7 wins is a good key indicator. But teams that lose their top players and still win games are often coaches that are voted. Teams that win a lot of 1-score games because these come down to coaching decisions late in the game.
Right.
So that is a big factor. But overall, the coach who can just improve their team the most from the previous season has won a lot of this. But I think this is why people like Belichick, he's only won the award 3 times. Andy Reid's only won it once, and that was back in 2002. So, I mean, these 2 are consistently 2 of the top coaches in the NFL, but they just don't really fit that criteria. Who would you be taking a shot on here?
Yeah, I mean, and you said that, one of the criteria is teams that lose the top players but still win games. But Andy not winning the award after they got the 1 seed in the AFC despite losing Tyreek Hill basically tells us that you can't win this award if you have an elite quarterback on your team. The last time we saw it go to a coach that had an elite quarterback on his team was Bill Belichick in 2010. So that's over a decade ago now. So I'm going to narrow this down to teams that do not have an elite quarterback, and the team with the highest win total without one of those guys is San Francisco. And Kyle Shanahan has never won this award despite being well recognized as one of the best coaches in the NFL. And, the Niners could easily win 13 to 14 games in a soft NFC this year. And Kyle Shanahan is listed at 20-1. So he is going to be probably my favorite value in this market.
It feels like this pick kind of goes to a team that needs to just turn it around. Is there anyone that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Niners wouldn't be that kind of team because they were so good last year. So if I had to pick a turn it around team, I'm going to go with Arthur Smith. I think the Falcons could definitely make that 5-win jump, that threshold that you mentioned earlier. That would have them finishing at 12-5. And they have just an incredibly soft schedule this year, second easiest in the NFL. And they also spent the second most money in free agency and were so confident in the roster that they put together that they felt comfortable drafting a running back in the top 10. And that usually works out when taking a running back that high, usually works out in the short term and then terribly in the long term. So short term, that's good for the Falcons. And the defense is league average in talent for the first time since that Super Bowl season. And I like them bringing in that aggressive defensive coordinator in Ryan Nielsen. Also, Arthur Smith would be the guy to get the credit if Desmond Ridder has a great season. I mean, third round pick. So if Ridder does perform well against that easy schedule, a lot of that credit is going to go to Arthur Smith. So at 11-1, we're looking for that turnaround team. Falcons fit the bill for me.
All right. Well, that will do it for our NFL award show. Next Wednesday, we are going to be back with our NFL futures, and these picks are going to be exclusive to the podcast. So make sure you tune in for that. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe.